Hey everyone, welcome back to Engelbard. We got a surprise release of Axiom Verge 2 a few days ago, so here's a surprise review of the Nintendo Switch version of the game. The first Axiom Verge came out in 2015 and helped really cement the future of the Metroidvania genre. Yeah, I know some people hate that name, but since we all understand it, I'm going to use it here just a few times. The original Axiom Verge was definitely much more on the Metroid side of the genre, and was primarily put together by one guy, Thomas Happ. All things considered, it was a really good game despite a few flaws, the most glaring of which was the lack of fast travel. Since Axiom Verge came out before my channel launched, for context, I'd give it a review score of a solid 8 out of 10. If you really want to see a full review of that game after watching this review, let me know. Axiom Verge 2 has been in the works for a while, from mostly the same one-man show, Thomas Happ, and it was stealth released just yesterday as I write this. I picked up the Switch version of the game and played all the way through it. Twice. So yes, I've completely beaten this game and seen the ending before writing any portion of this review. To begin, I'll just briefly touch on the story. The game is a prequel to the first Axiom Verge, and you play the role of a billionaire CEO flying to a base in Antarctica to find her estranged daughter. I can best sum up the story in one word: unnecessary. Axiom Verge 2 is all in on the lore though, so if you love that part of the first game, you actually get plenty more of it this time around, and there are notes just all over the place as well as more cutscenes. Personally, the story never grabbed me and I just wanted to play the game. Let's talk visuals. Axiom Verge 2 takes place in two worlds, sort of like The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past and other games that use a similar convention. The real world is referred to as the Overworld. The funky alternate dimension is known as the Breach. The Overworld is full of real-world locations, like mountaintops, lakes, caves, buildings, and stuff like that. While it's generally brighter than the original, it employs much the same overall style, going for sort of a hybrid 8 and 16-bit vibe. This time around there are more layers of scrolling, line-scrolling style effects, and in some cases animated backgrounds. It looks okay, but the environments just feel less creative and less interesting in this game compared to the first Axiom Verge. And compared to other recent games in the genre, I'd say it's a bit behind some of the more well-known ones, even those done by very small teams. The Breach has a few fancy graphical filters, and in these areas you'll encounter some of the nicest background animation the game offers. It all looks pretty good, but I'll say that your socks are perfectly safe, for they shall not be blown off. One note for Nintendo Switch fans. The game usually maintains its frame rate of 60 frames per second, but there are definitely times where the frame rate dips a bit, both while in the Overworld and in the Breach, although it does happen more often in the Breach, and you will definitely notice it even if you're not a tech head. The quality of the sound and music is pretty similar to the original. Just about all the songs are brand new, and many have a Mesopotamian flair to go along with the game's overall theme. Once you get into the Breach, the songs are more electronic and full of synth, and they sound a little bit more like some of the quirky 8-bit style tunes of the original game. And I know not all of the original game's songs sounded 8-bit, I've played it many times, but I'm just letting you know what it compares to. Overall, I'd say the music ranges from decent to fantastic. The sound effects are similar to, and in some cases identical to, the first game, with lots of digital bangs and booms. So Axiom Verge 2's sound, all things considered, is very good. Now let's talk about the meat of the game. No, not that, the actual gameplay. Axiom Verge 2 still squarely falls into the Metroidvania genre, despite what I've seen some people saying on the old interwebs in the last few days. It's still got that basic structure of, hey, here's an obstacle I can see but can't get past. Then you explore around for a bit, come across an item and go, oh hey, this will let me get past that thing that stopped me. Now where the f*** was that thing again? What's really different in Axiom Verge 2 is the way in which the game handles its action. It hugely de-emphasizes combat compared to the first game. In the original, the game was full of guns, many of which were kind of pointless, but there were a lot of them, and you took on foes from a distance in a variety of ways. Axiom Verge 2 arms you with a melee weapon and a ranged weapon, and there are only a few minor upgrades for each. Aside from that, the normal enemies now have distinct areas of vision, and won't go after you unless you contact those areas. It's almost like AV2 wants to be kind of a mishmash of Metroid, Hollow Knight, and Horizon Zero Dawn. Say, you know what I like? Boss fights. Do you like boss fights? Well, I hope you said no, because guess what? There are no more boss fights. There's one sort of mini-boss 3/4 in, and then one sort of boss fight at the very end, and you don't even technically defeat it to win. This is a huge change from the original again, and frankly I think it's worse off because of it. There are a few very large boss-like enemies hanging around here and there, but you can run right past them if you want, and the reward for beating them is pretty weak. Another big change Axiom Verge 2 makes to the basic formula is skill points, something almost no one was hoping for. Throughout the game, you'll find a bunch of containers that have 1 or 2 generic skill points that you can assign to a number of different attributes or equipment. You can do things like increase health, increase attack damage, speed up your hacking tool, and oh so much more. I've gotta say, incorporating this type of generic skill point system feels like a cop-out to me. Why, I hear you ask? Well, I'll tell you. In a game like Metroid, the map is carefully designed and the power-ups are put in places where you're likely to run into them at specific points in the game. Sure, you can sequence break, but that's for advanced players. Using generic skill points that you can just assign to anything means you don't have to carefully think about what power-ups should be placed where and at what point in the game players should encounter them. Now you can make a counterpoint and say that you like having the freedom to power up whatever you want when you want, to which I say, okay, then why are you playing a Metroidvania? Now something returning from the first Axiom is your remote-controlled drone. Without spoiling anything, I'll just let you know that the cute little spidery drone plays a larger role in this game than the original, and I'm okay with that. You even get a power-up for it that lets you launch yourself off hard-edged platforms all over the place, and it's fun to just throw your drone around. The drone only has sort of a short-range melee attack that can be powered up with, you guessed it, generic skill points. Now, have you ever picked up a major piece of equipment in a Metroid game or an exploration-based Castlevania and wonder, hey, what's this really for? Well, if you always wanted to experience that in a game, then good news. That'll probably happen to you once or twice in Axiom Verge 2. And this is not theoretical. I've seen people online in forums and on Reddit who literally didn't know what a few items did after getting them because the game doesn't tell you. As a spoiler-free example, there's this one thing you get where the description and help says that it's for attacking enemies. And yeah, it does that, but its primary purpose is to destroy a very specific type of obstacle. Yet this is never once mentioned in-game. Why not make that clear from the moment you pick it up? Because f*** you, that's why. And the thing that probably bothers me most about this game at the top of the heap is the game's mapping system. Hap tried to make it better by making it fancier so you always see the shape of what's inside each room on the map. Swell, only now it's not always clear which rooms have exits on what sides of them. This led to me being lost for several hours because I didn't realize there was one tiny ledge in one room about 60% of the way through the game that led to a new area. On the plus side of the map issue, each square now has its own coordinates, so now when you get stuck and have to ask for help, you can tell people exactly where you are while you wait for them to tell you to go f*** yourself. I've been a little hard on Axiom Verge 2 up to this point, and while some of it is clearly in fun, these are legitimate criticisms of the game. Also, the game is still pretty good, so let's talk about some of that good stuff. One great thing that Axiom Verge 2 does, that I really wish was in the original, is add fast travel into the game. Thank you! About roughly halfway through, you'll get the ability to travel to any save point you've seen in the entire game at will. There's only one restriction. You can only warp to save points that are in the world you're currently in, which means if you're in the overworld, you can't fast travel to a save point in the Breach and vice versa. Still, bravo for including this feature. The control in this game is also generally very smooth and responsive, making the time you spend with it as pleasant as possible. All the actions in what will be your sizable repertoire by the end of the game are easy to pull off. Consequently, it can be pretty easy to sequence break the game in a few areas too, and I actually did that by accident a couple of times. So, how long is Axiom Verge 2? I think on their first time through, most people will probably finish it somewhere in the 7 to 10 hour range. I ended up just over 15 hours after scouring the entire world for everything that I could find. You know, that plus the few hours I spent utterly lost like I mentioned before. But yeah, on a second playthrough, you can finish this game in about 4 hours or so. And speedrunners will probably shred that time because some of the obvious sequence break opportunities. Oh, and before I wrap things up, because I love you all, here's a public service announcement. There are times where you could possibly get stuck in an area if you do something by accident. Don't panic. Just open the game's menu and quit. You'll get an option to save when you do that. When you come back, you'll respawn at the last save point you used, and you won't have lost anything you picked up or any skill points you've applied. This little piece of advice is especially useful for you after you get the hacking tool. Let's wrap things up here. Axiom Verge 2 is a good game. It's fun to play and I enjoyed my time with it. Completely on its own merits, it's an above-average Metroidvania adventure that won't set the world on fire. As a sequel, or prequel technically, despite its multitude of gameplay changes, I would say it's a minor step backwards. The environments are a little more generic and just aren't as interesting to traverse. The watering down of the action and lack of boss encounters just makes this game feel a bit unfinished. I can't help but wonder what got left on the cutting room floor for Axiom Verge 2. Regardless, what we're left with is a solid adventure that will entertain, but is not as memorable as the original game or the best examples of the genre. My final review score for Axiom Verge 2 is a 7 out of 10. So what did you think about Axiom Verge 2? Had you been waiting for it for a long time? Have you already played it? Did you love the original? Or do you not care about the first one or this one at all? Let me know in the comments. That'll do it for this video, my current and retro gaming friends. If you enjoyed it, please toss it a like and share it. If you haven't yet, please subscribe and hit the notification bell for more of the same in a good way. With that, I'll say thanks for watching, and see me later.